Hey everyone, welcome back to Body Haven Soaps. My name is Darlene and I am the owner and creator of Body Haven Soaps. On this channel, the whole goal is to help fellow creators create. So we go over business information, we go over formulating, recipes, and I share some of my recipes with you guys so you can use those as a starting formula, and I help with whatever questions I can. Today's video is going to be on pH, the importance of why we test pH, why you should always test pH, and I already explained why we use it in our stability testing and things like that, because pH can drift. So it's really important that you understand how to test it, the proper way to test it, and that you're monitoring those types of things. So we're going to go over the reasons why it's important. I just want to say a quick thank you to all of my subscribers. I greatly appreciate all of your support, especially while I'm rebuilding my business after the flood. I really do greatly appreciate it, and I love having all the questions, you guys, so thanks for reaching out and communicating with me. I greatly appreciate that. For my patrons, thank you so much for all of your support. I am helping a couple of you with recipes which we've got formulated, and now everybody's trying them out, and we're working on the stability testing and all of that kind of stuff. Thank you guys very much for all your patience through all of that. I greatly appreciate your support. Okay, so let's quickly talk about pH and the importance of why we test pH and how we should be testing pH. I've seen a lot of information out there, and I get a lot of questions about testing our pH and pH meters and stuff, and we're going to go over the pH meters in a minute. But first of all, why do we test the pH in our product, and how should we test the pH in our product? So we test the pH in our product so that we can make sure our preservative is working effectively, because most preservatives, or all preservatives, work in a specific pH range. Additives that we add into our formulas work in a certain pH range. So if I'm going to buy that expensive additive and put it into my product, I want to make sure that my product is at a certain pH range so that that additive is actually effective. If it's not effective, then that's a waste of that additive. The same with the preservative. If it's not within the pH range that the preservative you're using is working, then we have the issue of the preservative becoming ineffective. So the importance of understanding testing pH and how to test pH becomes a very important factor in our formulations. All right, so the natural, so water, for instance, you guys, is a 7. It's a very neutral, okay, pH level. So 7 is considered neutral, okay? For our skincare products, we want anything between the, I would say, 4 and 8. That is where we want the pH range. Now, it's going to depend on the type of product you're making, the purpose of that product. Is it a leave-on product? Is it a wash-off product? So we take a solid soap, for instance. We're at a much higher pH range, but that is a rinse-off product, and it is supposed to be at that higher pH range. Now, if you have a nice, healthy skin, your body does readjust the pH. It's a natural thing that our skin does. So the soap and rinse-off things, well, they're a little bit higher, and that's just, you're not going to get away from that, but it is a rinse-off product. Now, if I'm using a lotion and it's something that is applied to the skin that stays on there, we can disrupt the pH system of the skin to a point where it causes irritation, where it causes drying, chapping, rashes, things like that. So we want to make sure that our leave-on products especially are tested to a specific safe skin level. Okay, so I mean, cleansers and stuff like that we make with a facial cleanser, things like that, I want to make sure that they're between that 5 and 7. 5.5 is generally what I do for my leave-on creams. Even my cleansers, I try and be around that area. I mean, you get into the toners, things like that, we may be up in the 6.5, somewhere in there. It's really going to depend on what you're making and what you're adding to that formula. So I can't tell you exactly where your pH should be unless I knew all the ingredients in your product, what your additives are, what preservative you're using, what pH range that's going to work in. But that's all part of selecting our ingredients. So when I'm making a lotion, my goal is to get around a 5.5. I take a look at my ingredients, what type of ingredients work at that rate, which a lot do, but we have some very specific ingredients out there, especially our gelling agents, things like that, that work at a specific pH range. So if I can't test the pH, I can't make those things work. Okay, so we think about that. Moisturizers, things like that is acceptable anywhere from 5 to 7. Like I said, I try and be around the 5.5. Our skin is naturally more acid than alkaline, so I want to be kind of at the lower spectrum of that because I want to be as close to the natural skin as I can. So that type of thing. Okay, so the importance of testing your product, okay, is going to be to test the pH to make sure additives and make sure that your preservative that you are putting into that product actually function at that pH range, okay? Also, when they put it on their skin, is it going to disrupt the pH of the skin to a point where it causes irritation? Okay, and too acidy or too alkaline can do the same thing. So you've really got to understand and test where that is, all right? So that's kind of the importance of why we test pH. Now, how we test pH, you guys, I've seen where people dilute things to test pH. We should not be diluting our product. Diluting your product for testing pH isn't how your product is going to be used. It is not what the preservative is going to be sitting in, so it's not a relevant test. If I dilute 10% of my lotion here into 90% water, I've changed what is actually going on the skin. I've changed the ratio, the percentage, my formula. So I'm not actually testing my formula for a pH. So no, it should not be diluted. Okay, there is a couple exceptions to this rule. Soap bars, powder form, things that do not have water in them, that are in a solid form. We cannot test pH without water, so those do get diluted to be tested, but those are the only exceptions there is. Everything else should be tested as is. So lotions, things like that, no, we do not dilute them to test them. They have to be tested as they're going to be used. The whole dilution and testing preservative, I mean, that's for your raw products. That's not for your formulas and what you are doing. And most of the raw product testing is done prior to you getting that raw product, and all of that data is available to you when you buy it. So you should be testing in the form that you are going to actually use the product in. So a lotion should be tested exactly how it is. A liquid would be tested exactly how it is. If it is a scrub, anything like that, it is tested as it is. It is not diluted if it has any amount of water in it. Okay, so like I said, soap bars, powder form, that type of things, those solid forms without water are tested, diluted. Everything else is tested as is. Please do not dilute your formula and then test it. You will not get an accurate reading, and your preservative may not work, your additives may not work, and it may not be effective. Okay, and that can all go into the whole testing of shelf life and all those other things. So it's really important to be able to test your pH. I wouldn't be making products and selling them if I wasn't testing my pH. Okay, so that's kind of the importance there, guys. I want to make sure that my product is safe for my consumers to use. I want to make sure that my preservative is working in that product that I've made, and I want to make sure that the additives that I've put into that formula that I have picked to put into that formula work in that pH range. And all formulas are tested as they are designed to be used. So there's a couple different ways that we can do this, and I'm going to go into explaining that to you, and I'm going to go through calibrating your pH as well. All right, so let's get into that. Yeah, so I have a few different things set up here. Now, first of all, when you buy, let's talk about the devices themselves, okay? So I have a couple different things. Lots of people use these paper pH testing strips, which I always keep on hand in case something happens to my monitor's not working properly or what have you. And they just simply come in a little package, and they've got little strips that you can pull off. They're fairly cheap. I think I got 3 packages of these for $6. You don't want to be running your fingers all over them because it'll pick up the pH from your fingers. Okay, so be careful when you're playing with them. And then it's got the little chart here that shows you your pH range, and it changes color. So we'll go over that. Now these are just paper strips, so they work really well in a liquid solution, but in creams and things like that, they do not work that well. So another type of strip that we can purchase is ones like this, okay? And they're more of a plastic material, and they've got the little charts on the back. And I always have these on hand too, and they just simply come out like this. But this I can dip into a lotion. It doesn't get all soggy, and I can kind of wipe the lotion off once it's on there so I can see the pH. So these are kind of a plastic material which aren't going to tear and rip. So that is another type of pH strip. They are a little bit more expensive. I think I paid $7 or $8, and there is, I believe, 100 strips in this package. And these ones here, I believe there is 100 in each one of these packages, and I got 3 of these for $6. So, and these I just got off Amazon, you guys. So you can get the paper ones, you can get the plastic ones, you can have both, okay? If I'm doing a liquid solution, I don't mind using these if my meter's not working, and then I have these if I'm doing a thicker material. Okay, so those are the types of pH strips that you can purchase. Then we also have our pH meters. Now, I've had a lot of questions about what's the best pH meter. As you can see, I have 2 different ones here. Okay, this one is just like $11 pH meter, and it works, but not in your lotions and things like that. It's meant for a liquid formula. Okay, so these work if you're diluting your product, which we wouldn't want to test our product in a diluted form. So this would work for any liquid, okay, pH testing, but it will not work to test your lotions and things like that because we don't want to dilute them. This one here can go right into the lotions. I paid about $60 Canadian for this. And it's at the lower end. It's what I can afford right now. I had a more expensive one before, but it is going to work for what I need it for, and I can always upgrade later. But this I can put right into my lotion. So there's different tips here. This one here, it looks like this little globe is at the end, and it only goes into liquid. You can't put this into your creams and things like that. So for what it's worth, you know, yeah, it's a cheap one, but we shouldn't be diluting. So it's really going to depend on what it is you're testing your pH in. If all you have is liquid, then absolutely. So if you're just making soap, for instance, well, soap is a solid form, and we can only test pH in a liquid form. It has to be in a liquid form. So we would dilute soap, so to say, okay? Or a powdered form. Well, we would dilute a powder form because you can't test pH in a powder form. So you're going to dilute that to test the pH. Those are the 2 exceptions to dilution. Okay. Then this would work because you're going to dilute it and test it in, right? Those are both rinse off products that come in a state that cannot be tested without adding water. So we would be okay with this. But if you're going to get into the lotions and things like that, you guys, you're going to need a more expensive meter that actually has an end that can go into the lotion mixture itself and test the pH of the product as it's designed to be used. All right, so we want to make sure that we're testing lotions, things like that, as the lotion, as the product you're selling, because you want to make sure that it's safe to put on people's skin. You also want to make sure that the preservative you put in there is actually in the pH range that preservative is actually functioning. All right, so this is the meter I would go with if you guys are going to be making lotions or anything with a thicker emulsion gel, those types of things. Okay, so that would be the meter of choice. So this is the one I would go with, or there is more expensive ones out there, you guys. I just, you know, rebuilding, so this is what I've got right now. I've already calibrated it and went through it and tested it, and it's working well. And I mean, I just got it, so over time we'll tell, but I paid about 60 Canadian for this. Okay, this I paid 11 something for. So you can see the price difference there, but reality is what it is. What are you testing? Okay, so those are the different types of meters. Now, when I purchase these meters, each of them come with packets, and this is for your calibration. Okay, so one package is going to be 4 pH. This one is going to be 6.86. And this one here is going to be 9.18. Now this meter here only comes with the 2 packages. This meter here is more technical, so you actually calibrate it to 3. I have calibrated both to 3. You can do that, that's not a big deal. It's just it only comes with the 2. But I've gone ahead because we should recalibrate these depending on how much you're using it, once a month. Or you can calibrate it if you're using it a lot, you know, every 2 weeks. Okay, so one thing that I will say about these solutions before we get going. Now, these solutions say right on the package that they are meant to, okay, be diluted with 250 milliliters of water. So I've measured out 250 milliliters of water in each of this. This is just my clean water for rinsing. But they are diluted in 250 milliliters of water. Now, I go ahead when I purchase this and I bought a package that has a whole bunch of them in there. So I have solution. A trick, you guys, is you don't have to use one of these packages every 2 weeks or every month. I will calibrate mine every 2 weeks when I'm using it a lot. So what I do is I'll mix up my solution into a bottle. Okay, I don't need all this solution to do the first calibration. So I use distilled water, and I will mix in my my pH adjuster into the 250 mils of water. That is mixed to strength. I will then just use a smaller container, and I will pour some of that liquid into those smaller containers, and I only use a small portion, but then I can continue using it. Once you've dipped your thing in here, you can't use this again. So don't dip it in and try and save this. Store some of it and only use what you need to do your adjustment. It will save you in the long run from purchasing a whole bunch of these. So this is a lot, and it will last me a long time because that's what I will do. For today's example, I've just mixed it to the 250 mils, but I cannot store this afterwards, and I cannot save this afterwards once I have put the meter into these, because now we've got contamination. So I will use a sterile container. I will mix my solution. I will use what I need and store the rest without contaminating it. Okay, so that's a way that we can preserve this and be able to calibrate our meter more often without it being a huge cost. Okay, so that's what these are. Okay, now these are all mixed to the 250. This one here, you guys, it's pretty straightforward. Very simple to use. It's got an on-off button and it's got a calibrating button, but that's all it does. So when we test pH, we're also looking at the room temperature that we're testing in, because that can change the pH level. So if you look at the packets on the back of it, 25 is the temperature Celsius, or 77 Fahrenheit is the temperature that you want to be testing the pH at, and it changes. So if it was 20 Celsius in my house, then this package would actually read at 9.23. All right, so there is a little chart on the back of these so that you guys can see, and you should be taking the temperature of your water if you're going to use a device like this, or your pH strips. The temperature of the water will decipher, okay? So you want it to be the same temperature as what your product is that you're testing. because temperature will change the pH. So that's one thing people don't realize, and you have to understand that. But that's why they have that little chart on the back of all of these. So for this to test at the 9.18, I need this to be at 25 degrees Celsius or 77 Fahrenheit. It will change according to the temperature. So this one here has no temperature adjustment on it at all. So I want to make sure that I have my temperature gun, and I'm looking at what the temperature of the solution is that I'm actually testing, okay, to calibrate this. And then I want to make sure that I've made note of that, so that when I go to test a liquid of what sort, that I'm testing at the same temperature as what I calibrated this device as. One of the advantages of this device is that it adjusts temperature. So it actually does have a temperature adjustment in it. So when I put it into the solution, no matter what temperature it is, it will adjust the pH to that temperature for me. So I don't have to worry about taking the temperature or anything like that. All right, so that's the advantage of one of these more expensive ones as well. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. So let's talk about the paper strips. They are pretty simple, you guys. You simply are just going to take this test strip off, and all you're going to do, this is the 4, okay, pH of 4. You're going to dip it in, and you're just going to allow that to change color, okay, to whatever the 4 is. And then you've got your little chart here that you're actually going to take, and you're just going to look to see where it is. And I mean, that's definitely reading at a 4. Okay, we could take another one of these strips and we can test it into the 6.86, and you're simply going to dip it in there, so that excess water off it. It's going to change color according to the pH. So you can see these are very effective and work really well. And you're going to take a look at the color of that, and that's between, you know, that's getting up into the 7 for sure. So it's close. So you can see how this isn't precisely accurate. They get you close. So this is reading at a 7, okay, and it's a 6.86. So you can see that. And we can take another one for this one, and this would be the 9.18. You can dip it in there, and you can see that we have gone darks, okay, and this is supposed to be a 9.18, and it's reading pretty close to, yeah, it's definitely reading at the 9. Okay, so you can tell that it's not going to get very precise. You're going to be single digit numbers. It's not going to give you the point, but it's going to give you the range that you're in. So that's very effective. Okay, and then the same with this one. Now this one, so this one is a little bit more technical because it's got 4 different color strips on it. Okay, and you're going to be able to read where that is. So let's take this one, and we're going to dip it in here. Okay, we look at the color of this, okay, and then we're going to compare it onto here. And when we compare it onto here, you're going to see about where you are, and you're going to check the colors on here. Okay, I'm doing it upside down, but essentially, you guys, we are definitely at the 4 range. Okay, so I mean, it's pretty simple how these work and straightforward, but you're not going to get those precise measurements like you would with a digital. Okay, we can see that this here, it's pretty much reading at a 7, which is what we expected because it doesn't do the points, right? And this one here, it shows you kind of the lower end and the higher end, right? And we can definitely see that that is reading at a 9. It's not going into, yeah, it's kind of the lower end of the 9. Okay, so those are pretty straightforward. They work basically the same. These test strips, like I say, you do not get the point percentage on there. So if you're trying to get a 5.5, these strips just aren't going to work because you're not going to be able to determine that. But simply, you just want to use this in a basic situation. Okay, and I always have them on hand in case my meters quit working or anything like that, because I can't wait for one to come in. But that is an option, okay? And it's not as precise, but you can get a very close reading, close enough that it would work for our preservatives, it would work for our ingredients, and you definitely make sure that it's not dangerous to the skin. So these would function as a basic pH testing. All right. This one here, as I said, does not adjust to temperature, but it works exactly the same. You're just going to turn it on and you're going to put it into the solution. Okay, now I've already calibrated these. This one here, you guys, you're just going to turn it on and it will start to blink and go all over the place. And then you're going to hit this calibration button and you're going to stick it in. I'm going to rinse it first in the clean water. Okay, and I'll hit the calibration button and then it goes to a 0, and then I will put it into this. I hold it until it stabilizes, and this one will actually just switch to end is all it'll say. Okay, and now that it said the word end on it, just like the instructions suggested, I will rinse it. I will put it into, rinse it always before you put it into the next one. Put it in the solution, hit the calibrate button again. It will start to blink. And it did calibrate to the 8.6, said end, and you just continue like that. But you can only use this one in your water solution, and you should always note the temperature that you're actually calibrating this at for when you're testing. So it's a little bit more work to use this one. Okay, so pretty simple like that. All right, this one here, you guys, it's pretty simple. The batteries go in the top. It has an on-off button. It's got a calibrate button, and it has a backlight button. I don't think I would use that one. And in the bottom of here, it actually has a little sponge in there, and that little sponge in there keeps my little sensor moist. So that helps the longevity of that sensor, so that's a good thing. And there is a line that you don't go past on this, and as I said, this can go into your lotions and things like that, but you're simply going to push and hold it on. Okay, it will start to calculate. We will give it a quick rinse. I'm going to put it in my solution of 4 and hit the calibrate button. It's blinking and saying that it's calibrating. And you have to hold it there until it says pass. Remember that this one does adjust the temperature and such, so it takes a little bit longer to actually test the pH, because it is recalculating the temperature for you as well. Okay, and then it says the word pass on it. So we're going to take and rinse that off. We move it into the next one because phase 2 is blinking, and we're going to dunk it into there. Okay, and it has said pass again, so once again we rinse it. And now phase 3 is blinking, so we put it into here. Okay, and now it passed at that one, so we simply rinse that off. And we're going to put the cap on it, and I just leave it wet, guys, so that little sponge at the bottom, so the actual sensor at the bottom doesn't dry out, and put it in there, and we're ready to go. That's how easy it is to calibrate one of these, so there's no reason why we're not doing it all the time. As I said, this one does do the temperature adjustments. You will have to do 3 instead of the 2, but that's how easy it is to calibrate that. So a couple tips with this, you guys. When you're using these, make sure that you don't go above the top line that you're supposed to, so it wrecks the device. And don't touch that globe with your finger or pull on it or anything else. Okay, you want to rinse that off in a solution, or use a medical Q-tip if you have to. All right, so that's how simple that is, and that one is calibrated. So let's test a couple formulas here. Now, as far as adjusting pH, that's pretty much a whole nother video that we will go over. So let's get these things out of our way. All right, so this is that lotion you guys seen in the last one there. So as you can see, it's still pretty solid. All right, and this is a formula that I'm working on with another lady off of my Patreon. It is for a jelly mask. And we have been working together and figuring out how to bring the properties that she wants and how she wants to have this design. So that is something that we have been working on. So we will test that as well today. All right. So when we're testing that, you guys, and this is just one of my sample ones. So it was one that actually was too liquidy, and we have reformulated it since. And once we do have that formulation right, she has given me the permission to do a video on it. So because I am helping her create it, but she would like to see a video on it. So you can look for a facial gel coming soon. Okay. But let's test the pH of it. So when you take your pH meter out, okay, the very first thing you want to do is you always want to have a cup of distilled water. Okay. And the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to rinse that off. Okay, shake the excess water off. And as I said, this one, I can stick into both of these. This I cannot. Okay, I can use test strips to test these as well. This doesn't work as well with the paper ones, but I could use the plastic ones that I bought and that would work as well. So let's stick it into this one first. And you're just going to stick it and submerge it right in there. And it's going to begin to read it. These ones do take a little bit of time to stabilize simply because it is adjusting the temperature. Okay, and this is one of our trial batches. We have thickened it up and made some adjustments to it as we're formulating it, because we all know formulating is test and trial. Okay, so this right now is at actually 4.3. Okay, so with 4.3, that's on the acidic level. And remember, we were just talking about we want that property, okay, of products to be between that, 4 to 8. Okay, I would like to see this a little bit higher, so I'd actually bring up the pH in this slightly to a 5.5, somewhere in there is where I'd like to see it. And once you pull it out of there, you guys, you're just going to make sure you rinse it really well. Okay, so that's how easy it is to test it. Make sure that you've rinsed it well. You don't have a bunch of goop in there. Okay, and sometimes you have to get a little Q-tip, especially when we get into the lotion. I'm just going to test right into this because this is going out anyways. So when I made this lotion, and this was that one that we had in the last video that has been through heck, I'm not using this. I'm using it for testing purposes only. This here was designed to be at a 5.5. Okay, so now it's reading at a 5.2, so it did drift slightly, and that's why we check our pH, because that's a slight drift, and considering everything that's been through, this is still safe to use on the skin at this pH level. The preservative I've used in it is still safe at that pH level. So that's the reason that we continuously test the pH when we're doing our stabilization process. Maybe that makes it a little clearer for you guys. If this was down below 3 or up above 8, now the Dermal Plus that's in here, it is way out of that pH range, and whatever preservative I have in there is no longer effective. Okay, so once you've got in there, you guys, just simply rinse it out. Make sure you've got all of the stuff out of there. Make sure it's rinsed good, and then you just put the cap back on it. Okay, plain and simple like that, and we'll just turn that off. Now with these strips, you guys, as you can see, I'll just so I can show you how the strips work in something like this. With something like this, with a paper strip, you're going to have to dilute it, okay, which is not how we want to test it. So you shouldn't be using paper strips to test a lotion, but we'll use a paper strip in this one, okay, and we're just going to wipe off some of it. I know what the reading was on the meter, so let's see what this paper strip gives us. Okay, and this gave us, right, and this is coming out in the 5 somewhere, 5 and 6 That's as close as we can get with this. Not going to get your points or anything in there, but it's between 5 and 6. So this is safe to use on the skin. Okay. And in the lotion, I would use, as I said, one of these plastic strips. If I didn't have a pH meter, I would be investing in these, which will actually cost you more money in the end than just buying the proper meter, you guys. But I can dip this in there and I just leave the lotion sit on there for a second. I wipe any excess off because it's plastic and I can do that. And I can actually start to see the colors come through and be able to compare that on the chart in the back. So yeah, we're at the end of 4, the beginning of 5 with those colors. Okay, so I mean, you're still getting a fairly accurate reading with them. Okay, but in the long run, there's only 100 test strips in this, and I can use this a lot of times. Okay, so I mean, what's more cost effective and what's more efficient for you guys? If you have the ability, I would just go ahead and get something like this, because you're going to be able to use it for a long time, and it is a closer, more accurate reading because now we've got temperature, everything being calculated in there. Okay, but that's how easy it is to test things. So we've talked about the importance of why testing pH is important. We've gone over the different types of pH testing devices that we can use and what your options are. And we have also gone over the importance of testing pH. All right, so I mean, as far as all the questions I have been receiving for, you know, what would I suggest for pH testing, things like that. I always have these types of things on hand because, you know, in the off chance that this stuff isn't working, then I want to use this. I would opt for this before this because this does not adjust temperature. This one does. And this one, you can only do it in liquid, so you can't test anything with emulsifications or anything like that with it. And we should not be diluting our product. So this one is liquid only, okay? And you would have to check your temperature of the substance that you're actually testing the pH of. This one does have a temperature adjustment in it. You can test your emulsifications and everything with this meter. You don't have to dilute anything. So this would be the best one that I would go with. Okay. And this is, I mean, this is at the lower end of it because it's what I could afford right now. The one I had before was $100 and some. It was really nice and it worked really well, but this is what I can afford right now. So that's what I have purchased and what I will be using. Okay. So I would go ahead and invest in one of these if you can afford to. If not, I would get these plastic strips at least to test my lotions with. Before I went and purchased one of these. Okay, if you can afford it, this, I always have these on hand just in case. So these would be the 3 things that I would purchase personally. And everybody might have a different opinion, but I would have these here. And then this here, yeah, you guys, it's low end. It doesn't adjust your temperature. It doesn't test anything but liquids. So it's very short range. Like I say, this here would be better than purchasing this. So I would just go ahead and get these if that's what you can afford. If you can't, and you can afford the rest of this, I would just buy this package right here. This is the lower end one. You can get a better one if you can afford it. And then I would just simply have these test strips on hand. Okay. So hopefully that answers some of your guys' questions as far as pH meters. The importance of why we test pH in products and how we calibrate a pH meter, okay, and proper storage of a pH meter. I will always store my pH meter since we haven't talked about that yet. I actually have a cup on a shelf and I'll actually store it upright. I won't lay it down to store it, so it's always upright. Okay, so if there is any water in there, it drips down. I don't touch the little globe on the bottom. This one is kind of handy because I said it has that little sponge in there, so it keeps that little globe moist like it needs to be able to function. So that is the proper storage of your pH meter. Okay, try and leave it standing. I put it in a little cup so it doesn't fall over. It does come with this little case. Okay, I won't use this case simply because to store, I mean, I could and then store it upright, but I would always have this down so that any moisture drips away from the actual electronics of that. And that's just for longevity of the device itself. Okay, so hopefully you guys found that informative. We will do a video later on how to adjust pH in our formula, using different things to adjust them. That will be coming up in the near future. So any questions further about your pH meters, things like that, put them in the comment box below and I will do my best that I can to answer those for you. And I hope that you guys understand how important it is to test your pH. All right, have a great day.